and it can cover whole fields with purple. And when you stand out there, you can smell its sort of sweet, delicate scent, and it's so quiet in the desert, you can hear the bees.
Pack your cameras. A banner bloom is just around the corner.
Guess that was the last bit of downhill we'll see for the end. Oh boy.
Pedal power and the rush hour commute. The pros and cons of leaving cars behind in San Diego. And demands for action following a sewage spill on the border. The San Diego lawmakers leading the charge for an investigation.
I'm in downtown San Diego, where we just heard from the widow of Anastasio Hernandez Rojas, a Mexican immigrant who was killed in an incident with Border Patrol. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. There are growing calls for action following a massive cross-border sewage spill that ran unchecked for more than 2 weeks. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson has more.
Mexican officials confirmed last week that 143 million gallons of treated sewage flowed into the Tijuana River and then into the U.S. over a period of more than 2 weeks. Congressman Juan Vargas and Scott Peters are calling on the State Department and Environmental Protection Agency to investigate the spill and work with local communities to rehabilitate the affected area. San Diego City Council member David Alvarez says the U.S. and Mexico signed a treaty amendment 2 years ago designed to deal with just this kind of situation.
We were going to keep each other accountable for environmental concerns, specifically as it relates to the Tijuana River Valley. Clearly, that's being violated, and we need accountability. Our commissioners, the leadership, the federal agencies on both sides need to be responsive and need to be very clear about what happened.
The U.S. International Boundary and Water Commission has announced it will work with the Mexican government to figure out what happened. That decision came yesterday. Alvarez will still attend a local meeting of the IBWC tonight to present his concern. He says there is plenty of blame to go around.
Obviously, the culprit of what came in is Mexico, and that needs to be fully investigated. But the fact that our own agency, our American agency, did not notify anybody, tell anybody, questions went unanswered, that's also very concerning. You can't just sit, and not respond to the public.
Alvarez says the massive spill was caused when Mexican crews diverted sewage so they could perform an upgrade on another sewage pipe. That spill stopped, but the sewage does continue to flow across the border. Alvarez shared these pictures that he got from Border Patrol officials. They show a stream of black liquid flowing out of the Goat Canyon area toward the Tijuana River on the U.S. side of the border. The flow is being tested to see if it contains sewage. Eric Anderson, KPBS News.
The family of Anastasio Hernandez Rojas gets a tentative $1 million settlement with the federal government. He died in 2010 after border agents repeatedly shot him with a stun gun. It happened at the San Ysidro port of entry. KPBS Fronteras reporter Jean Guerrero has more from his widow, who was searching for justice.
I'm in downtown San Diego, where the $1 million settlement was tentatively approved by a federal judge earlier today. They're awaiting some paperwork, but the family's attorney said that the 5 children of the widow, Maria Puga, will be getting the money within the next 2 months. Maria Puga, the widow of Anastasio Hernandez Rojas, says the settlement isn't justice for her because her husband's life doesn't have a price, and her children are traumatized by what happened. She spoke at a press conference about the settlement.
Es una vergüenza que estos 12 agentes, que esta corporación tenga trabajando todavía a esos 12 agentes que brutalmente asesinaron a mi esposo.
My feeling is that it's an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment that this agency continues to have those 12 agents working, those agents that killed my husband.
Her attorney says the officials involved in the killing haven't been sanctioned at all. Attorney Gene Iredale says he fears the recent decision to beef up Border Patrol by 5,000 agents will lead to more problems of oversight.
Unfortunately, the attitude that was so prevalent in what happened to Anastasio has now received a renaissance because of the new administration.
Earlier today, the Southern Border Communities Coalition also released new footage showing the events that led up to Hernandez's death, including a moment where he drags his foot, which was allegedly injured by one of the officers. Hernandez Rojas' family also filed a complaint with the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights against the U.S. government, accusing officials of engaging in a cover-up. Jean Guerrero, KPBS News.
The nation's top cop will recuse himself from a federal investigation into Russian interference with the presidential election. Democrats and Republicans have been calling for Attorney General Jeff Sessions to step aside. This after news reports shows he talked twice with Moscow's U.S. envoy during the presidential campaign.
But when you evaluate the rules, I feel like that I should not be involved in investigating a campaign I had a role in.
Democratic members of Congress are weighing in, including Congresswoman Susan Davis from San Diego. After the Attorney General's news conference, she tweeted, "An Attorney General who needs to recuse himself after an investigation this important should not leave the Department of Justice." We'll have more on the political fallout and analysis on PBS NewsHour. That starts at 7 right here on KPBS. California's Attorney General is opening an office in D.C. It'll bring Javier Becerra closer to the fight he's expecting with the Trump administration. Last month, he promised to defend California's forward-leaning values against what he called the president's unconstitutional, un-American executive orders. Governor Brown appointed Becerra to complete the term of fellow Democrat Kamala Harris after she was elected to the U.S. Senate. Harris did not keep an office in D.C. The California Supreme Court ruled today on the private accounts of public officials, saying emails and texts about government business are public records, whether they're on a private channel or not. The unanimous ruling clears up a murky area of law in California. Many other states treat private emails and texts of government officials as public documents. Opponents have raised privacy concerns. The company behind Snapchat closed on a high note in its Wall Street debut. Shares of Snap Inc. jumped 44% over the course of its first day as a publicly traded company, closing at close to $24.50 a share. The Los Angeles-based company's IPO was one of the most anticipated since Twitter in 2013. Snapchat is best known for disappearing messages and quirky face filters for jazzing up selfies. San Diego's biggest contributor to climate change is transportation, and our dependence on cars is one of the biggest challenges the city has in meeting its goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We've brought you stories on efforts to build denser housing closer to jobs and about increasing public transit. Now, KPBS reporter Andrew Bowen looks at where private employers fit into the city's climate action plan.
I'm at the Sorrento Valley Coaster Station, meeting a small group of people who work for Vertex Pharmaceuticals. They're getting ready for a bike ride to their office in Torrey Pines.
Hi. You guys the Vertex crew?
It's just after 7 a.m. The sun is still coming up, and it's a bit chilly. Perfect biking weather.
Let's get going, I guess.
It's a pleasant ride at first, a gradual incline on a protected bike path. But before long, we turn on to Genesee Avenue.
Guess that was the last bit of downhill we'll see for the end. Oh boy.
It's a lot steeper, and the only thing separating us from the cars is a stripe of paint. I'm glad we're in a group. The hill is tough. I try not to let on how winded I am when we get to the top.
Is that it? Oh, that wasn't so bad.
About 20 minutes after leaving the train station, we get to our destination. One of the guys in the group is Philip Saltzman, an engineer for Vertex Pharmaceuticals. He says he bikes to work almost every day.
Because traffic was getting too much for me, and sometimes for 10 miles would take, not always, but sometimes an hour, and it was frustrating. And I thought a lot about how to beat that system, and I biked a few times, but I was too lazy. But then I got the electric bike, and now I can do it 90% of the time.
Saltzman says he didn't start biking to work for environmental reasons, but now that he is lowering his own carbon footprint, he feels good about it.
I think about that I save a gallon of gas a day, and that adds up for me.
Vertex makes it easier for Saltzman to bike. They have showers and indoor bike lockers, so he doesn't have to worry about his bike getting stolen. Vertex also offers a fully subsidized public transit pass. These incentives aren't just regular employee benefits. They're part of a sustainability plan that helped lead to this.
We took 2 buildings down entirely, completely demolished them. They were older, just not laid out very well.
Vertex is getting new office space here in Torrey Pines. Jason Moorhead is overseeing the construction for the developer, Alexandria Real Estate. He was also one of the ones on our bike ride.
This area is zoned for scientific research and development. And being that there's a limited amount of space for R&D in San Diego, we make the most of every square foot.
The new building will be denser than Vertex's current space. The project got faster city approval because of its sustainability elements. Moorhead says these kinds of measures are embraced by the life sciences industry.
Being that they are, for the most part, scientists, they understand what's happening with the climate and support the efforts that we make to reduce our carbon impact.
San Diego's Climate Action Plan has ambitious goals when it comes to transportation. Huge numbers of people will have to switch from driving to biking, walking, or riding public transit. Nicole Capritz heads the nonprofit Climate Action Campaign. I meet her at a huge employee parking lot in Kearney Mesa, a perfect example of how San Diego encourages driving. Capritz says the city's climate plan can't succeed without the buy-in of private industry.
I actually think that those companies that are truly embedded into the community actually feel a broader purpose and actually feel that it is part of their role to embrace the goals of the city and actually help reduce our carbon footprint.
That being said, it's not private industry that's on the hook for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It's the city, and some employers can't afford the kind of biking or transit incentives that a pharmaceutical company like Vertex can provide. Capritz says that's where the city has to step up and help.
And actually, I would love to see more of our elected officials leading by example. I would love to see the mayor ride his bike to work, once a week. Something that, again, sets the right tone and signals a cultural shift and signals that we are all in this together and we all have to do our part.
Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
One of the most high-profile programs to fight climate change is falling flat. The state saw a weak demand for pollution permits offered under its cap-and-trade program. Fewer than 1 in 5 permits were distributed. The permit auction will raise about $8 million. This is far less than the $500 million the state typically expects. Lawmakers use cap-and-trade revenue to fund clean energy programs and high-speed rail. A Los Angeles-based consumer advocate is raising questions about Governor Jerry Brown's environmental credentials, specifically his ties to the fossil fuel industry. KPBS reporter Eric Anderson spoke with Liza Tucker from Consumer Watchdog about her report.
The report was How Green is Jerry Brown? And we looked at 7 different areas, everything from oil and drilling and fracking to coastal protection. And we found that in 6 out of 7 areas, Jerry Brown actually was murky at best. We used a system of clean to murky to dirty, and we found him murky or dirty in 6 out of 7 of those categories.
And you found that he favors the fossil fuel industry in California.
Yes, I found that there was some hypocrisy involved here. That on the one hand, he claims that climate change is the biggest existential threat to the planet. On the other hand, he has done nothing but nurture and protect the fossil fuel industry and the energy industry that relies on natural gas.
There are some direct local impacts of this relationship. What are they?
Yes, there are direct local impacts on ratepayers, several of them. One is you have one natural gas-fired plant and then another one. Both of them were initially denied by a PUC judge as unjustified because you are supposed to turned to all the other methods of avoiding building a natural gas power plant, which includes paying people not to use electricity at peak times of the day, includes rooftop solar, includes a lot of other things you could be doing. No bid contracts.
And we're talking about Carlsbad.
We're talking about Carlsbad, and we're talking about Otay Mesa. We're talking about Pio Pico. I mean, these were no bid contracts. These were sweetheart deals, bilateral. These were not competed. They were not defended in Superior Court because you can't take the PUC to Superior Court. And they're there to fatten shareholder wallets more than anything else. I mean, it's a gold-plated return of 20 years on, what, $2.2 billion for Carlsbad, and it's an outrage. Those things should be stopped in their tracks.
You say that you're concerned also that the governor hasn't taken advantage of his ability to reform the people who regulate California's fossil fuel industry,
No, that's
CPUC.
correct. I mean, there are a lot of people who are now at the CPUC who were former associates of his in another life when he was governor the first time around. For example, Michael Picker, who's the president now of the PUC, was an aide on toxics during Brown's first incarnation as governor in the 1970s and 80s. Michael Picker, in addition, has sort of been now the understudy for Michael Peavy. Michael Peavy, who's under criminal investigation for his backroom deal in a Warsaw hotel, oversticking ratepayers with the lion's share of the $4.7 billion cost of closing San Onofre. He goes way back. In fact, Peavy was a friend of Pat Brown's, Jerry's father, and he began on behalf of Pat Brown, who founded a nonprofit, business nonprofit, looking at how to balance the economy with the environment.
Okay, the governor's office in published reports says that the governor's record on the climate is unmatched. And here's what they say. An administration official said the state's efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions are exemplary. They've increased electricity coming from renewable sources. They've called on an increase in the number of zero-emission vehicles on the road. And in a published story, a governor's spokesperson called your assertions a bit cuckoo. What do you say to that?
I would say that it's a bit cuckoo to deny that we have a problem here in terms of how we are managing a transition to a clean economy. And those assertions, they're true. Jerry Brown has done an incredible amount. His renewable energy goals are unparalleled. His efforts to want to put electric cars on the road, the billions of dollars he's putting into renewable energy projects, all of those things are very laudatory. But when you really look at the record and you juxtapose it, it's one hand clapping. You know, there's another hand that has to clap, and that's fossil fuels. We need to be making a faster transition away from them, and there's no reason why we can't be. But Jerry Brown is very much attached and in some ways beholden to the major investor-owned utilities and oil and gas companies, and that has been reflected in his legislative record.
The most vibrant wildflower bloom in 2 decades is expected within 2 weeks at the Anza Borrego Desert. Nearly 6 inches of rain since December have doused the desert, located 2 hours east of San Diego. That's nearly twice as much as last year. Dozens of species of wildflowers have sprouted and their bright-colored buds are beginning to open. Clayton Schutte is the director of horticulture at the Water Conservation Garden at Cuyamaca College and a desert wildflower tour leader. He says creating a perennial paradise on the usually stark desert floor takes consistent rains, low winds, and mild temperatures.
The classic field of color plant out there is the dune verbena, and it can cover whole fields with purple. And when you stand out there, you can smell its sort of sweet, delicate scent, and it's so quiet in the desert you can hear the bees going into the verbena. It just sort of makes this incredible ambiance around you.
Judy says one of the best places to see the flowers near the Anza Borrego Desert State Park is the Visitor Center.
Yeah, baby. Woohoo!
This is how you take care of a blocked highway in Ramona. Boulders fell down the rain-soaked hillside along State Route 78, shutting down the highway earlier this week. Workers knocked it out with debris explosives on Wednesday. Swapping out rain jackets for sundresses. It felt a lot more like summer today in San Diego. Shanae Shocker tells us when we can expect a cool down.
An area of high pressure centered over the Great Basin, keeping much of the southwest very dry and clear for our skies. And as far as Southern California goes, this area of high pressure is offering some offshore wind flow. That's keeping our marine layer out, which is also allowing our temperatures to rise into our Friday. So clear skies for tonight, a low of 50 degrees, very comfortable out there. Now across the county, we'll continue to see fairly comfortable conditions for tonight. In Ramona, Alpine, sitting in those low 40s. We're above freezing, still into Mount Laguna, so that's always a plus. 43 degrees into Oceanside for this evening. Once again, clear skies for tonight, meaning we're not going to see that cloudy, dreary weather into tomorrow morning either. Now for our Friday, very warm weather in store for us here across the board, all the way really from San Francisco into San Diego here and driving its way out towards Phoenix. We're looking at record-breaking temperatures for the county tomorrow. Out towards the coast, that record 79 degrees. That's what we're looking at for our Friday. A lot of sunshine, but then as we head into the weekend, we'll start to see some cooler, more seasonable weather and even the chance for an afternoon shower come our Sunday. So we're not talking any heavy rain as we saw earlier on in the week, but we do see the chance of just a slight sprinkle here or there as well. 62 degrees for your high on your Sunday, staying in those low 60s into your Monday, but dropping the cloud cover. Chances of showers will remain in those low 60s, and then we'll climb back up into right around the 70-degree mark as we head into our Tuesday as well, mostly sunny skies. Now inland, this is where we see some very warm weather here, 85 degrees going into tomorrow. Do make sure you're drinking enough water for this warmer weather. 70 degrees for our Saturday as well, so dropping 15 degrees here. Much cooler, going to need to break out that jacket as well. Overall, our lows going to stay pretty steady in those 40s here, all the way into our Monday, that we see cooler highs. 71 degrees back on Tuesday, so warmer weather to return towards the early middle of next week. Now, as far as the mountains go, for our Friday here, temperatures for our highs going to be 73 degrees, but our lows 29. So we're jumping about 40 degrees in our overnight lows to our daytime highs, and we're cooling off into the 50s for our Sunday as well. And we'll stay there as we head into the rest of early next week. And last but not least, out towards the deserts, we'll stay quite warm, 82, 80 degrees into Saturday. And we're back in those 70s for the end of our weekend into early next week. For KPBS News, I'm Shanae Shocker.
A new San Diego library program will give kids a chance to roll up their sleeves and dig for bugs. Bug Out is part of a new initiative aimed at keeping kids interested in STEAM subjects. STEAM is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. STEAM classes and workshops will be offered at every San Diego library during March, April, and May. They'll include topics on beekeeping, computer coding, and more.
We're transforming libraries in San Diego to become hubs for knowledge and innovation, and we're thrilled to be able to offer these programs thanks to the mayor's support and through generous donors of the Library Foundation.
Spring into STEAM program is for 9 to 12-year-olds, and it begins Thursday at the city's 36 branch libraries. A former U.S. president is honoring veterans with his paintings. The collection is on canvas and in a new book, intended to raise money for those transitioning from the military to civilian life. AP reporter John Moan has the story.
A sobering array of faces on display. Veterans who served the United States during the invasion of Iraq.
And then in 2005, I took a small arms round through the helmet, which knocked me out while I was flying aircraft.
I got wounded in June of '07, hit by a roadside bomb, in which I ultimately suffered an amputation of my right leg.
The painter portraying the wounds of war, both external and internal, their commander-in-chief.
I'm a little nervous about what they think of the paintings.
8 years since George W. Bush left the White House, he has become an avid painter. He's also made it his own mission to get to know the armed service members who served him. and many are the subjects of his art.
And one of the things that I think is important about expressing yourself through paint is to, in my case, think about their stories.
Dozens of those stories are on display at Bush's Presidential Library in Dallas, a gallery perhaps displaying his processing of his own tenure, something of which Jay Fain took notice in his portrait.
Like if I was a painter, or if I was artistic, I was looking at this earlier, it seems like there's so much emotion put through this painting, you know, like so much time, like this one took some time to do.
Whatever critics eventually think of the former president's artistic efforts, Will Williamson says he's honored.
Well, one, it's humbling, but it was a remarkable experience for him to show me that he was doing it and then to see it here in the exhibit.
Bush is calling the collection Portraits of Courage and has released a book of the paintings to raise money for the Military Service Initiative, helping vets transition to civilian life.
And hanging out with these vets is uplifting.
Personal reminders of the sacrifice of service, both in uniform and in office. John Moan, Associated Press, Dallas.
You have brains in your head. You have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any directions you choose.
That's First Lady Melania Trump reading Dr. Seuss's All the Places You'll Go to kids at a hospital in New York today. It's in honor of the 113th birthday of Dr. Seuss. The author was a longtime resident of La Jolla. He died in 1991. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.